I'm going to admit everybody, okay?
Pick it up, Augustus. Pick it up. Deeper. Everybody see that. Pick it up. Come on.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It is such a pleasure to see so many of you here. I have been so excited over the last few weeks thinking about tonight. So excited about the book being out in the world, and getting to see people holding it in their hands is just so overwhelming and thrilling. And also I'm so excited about getting to see so many of you. You know, I've been writing for a really long time now, like a decade probably, and had thought about my launch party in years past and had pictured, like, you know, some event in the backyard or at Politics and Prose with cupcakes for everybody and champagne. And obviously that's not where we are right now. But the thing that is so fantastic and wonderful about this is that I get to be with so many people from all over the place. You know, it's not just limited to the DC people right here near me. I'm getting to see people from across the country, even some people from other countries. I would love, you know, just for a second, if you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat where you are, because I'm curious about who is the closest and who is the furthest away. So I'm in Chevy Chase, Maryland. I'm just curious who's going to be closest. I do believe that possibly my next door neighbor is on the call, so that might end up being the closest. But I also want to see who's the furthest. Oh gosh, Canada, upstate New York, love it. So great. Okay, so you guys, just a quick kind of agenda for what we're going to be doing here. Everybody should be muted for now. And what we're going to do is I'm going to say just a few kind of introductory remarks, and then I'm going to do a question and answer with my dear longtime friend, Kate Connolly. And then we're going to open it up to questions from everybody. And so you can either, during that time, you can either do the raise hand option and be called on and unmute yourself, or you can at any point drop questions in the chat box and we will answer them from there as well. Let's see, any other agenda items? Oh, we'll have a few people kind of stop by to say hello at various points during this hour-long event. And they will also be doing some book giveaways. So you do have to be present to win, but we will have about 10 books to give away. And I'm so excited to share the book. If you already have one, give it to a friend. I'm really excited to get to share the book with even more people. And so we'll do, after the Q&A from everybody, we will end with a little cheers. And at that point, I would love it if everybody just unmuted themselves and just said, you know, congratulations, cheers, mazel tov, whatever you like to say. So have a beverage of your choice handy for that moment. Okay, so just a little bit about me. Because I know I don't know everybody here, and some people know a little bit about me and know me from different parts of my life. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background on who I am and how I came to have written this book. So I have worked with crime victims for more than 25 years. I actually started in college. When I was at Smith College, I volunteered at the local domestic violence shelter on the hotline. And that was a really powerful and kind of formative experience for me. And it spurred me to go to law school to try to do right by victims through the legal system. Then I went to a firm for a few years, but ended up at the Justice Department. And I started there in 2004. And I stayed for about 15 years. And at DOJ, I was an attorney advisor on victim rights, which meant that I did department policy and a lot of training. And I also just got to talk to people about their cases, and particularly how to work with the victims in their cases. And that was, for me, really the most rewarding part of my job, because I got to see these really dedicated prosecutors and agents and victim advocates who were trying really hard to figure out how to help people at kind of the worst moments in their lives. And through that, I got to work on every different kind of case that the department prosecutes and investigates. So terrorism and large scale fraud and human trafficking and, homicide, sexual assault, child exploitation, every kind of case. And one of the things that began to be clear to me over the years was that there were certain things that people needed, no matter what the crime was. No matter whether it was a terrorism case or a fraud case or a domestic violence case, there were a few things that the victims needed. They needed to be treated with honesty and respect. They needed to get information. They all craved information. And they all needed to have somebody who was willing to listen to them and acknowledge what had happened to them. And over the years, those became sort of my touchstones on how I, thought about policy and working with victims in particular cases. But also, one of the things that I started to notice is it wasn't just the victims in the cases who needed those kinds of tools. I found that even in my everyday life, I was using those same kinds of skills. So, if a coworker, for instance, came into my office furious about the way that his boss had just spoken to him in a meeting, had belittled him in front of a bunch of people or something like that. And he's kind of pacing around my office and he's talking really fast. He's, really, really angry and upset. I was using the same kinds of skills that I would use with, a domestic violence victim or any other kind of victim. It was the same sorts of validating, listening, acknowledging his experience, and also the same kinds of tools I was using for myself to kind of keep myself calm and grounded and able to stay present for him. So I began to just think about this, that there are some universal things that everybody needs when they're going through a hard time. And that hard time can be something huge, like, a crime, or it can be something, more relatively minor, but those little hiccups that hit us every day, being spoken to rudely, bullying in the office. There are all kinds of ways that these issues come up. And so then I started thinking about the book and started to kind of write it up. I particularly was motivated by the Me Too movement. So this was in 2018, and I saw these just phenomenal survivors who were coming forward and sharing stories about what had happened to them. And I was so, thrilled about that and so proud of them and amazed at their bravery. But at the same time, I was frustrated because I felt like the response that they got was often not a supportive response. Instantly, somebody would come forward with a story that was very personal and sometimes, private, longstanding secrets, humiliating sometimes. And the response would be this instant, like, well, is she lying? Is she crazy? Is she getting paid? Maybe she's misperceived things. And I knew, because of my work at the Justice Department, that it's possible to hear a story of trauma and still conduct a full investigation while being supportive and respectful of the person who has shared this story with you. And that's when it really spurred me that this is something I want to write down. I want to write a book about this. And then, of course, in the way of publishing, it's, this was 2018 when I started the book, and here we are in 2021. It's a totally different world now than it was when I started writing. And I had no idea the level of trauma that we would be experiencing worldwide here in this past year. From the coronavirus to the political upheaval to economic concerns that a lot of people have, trauma is really all around us right now. And so I feel really, really grateful that I have this opportunity to be having conversations with people about how to support their teams, their clients, their coworkers through these times of trauma. And it has been, honestly, one of the greatest blessings of my life has been to be able to talk to leaders who are struggling with this question, who really, really care about their people and want to make sure that they're doing this correctly. So it's been just a wonderful ride along the way. So that's all I'll say for now. If you guys have questions, please, again, remember, drop them in the chat, or later on we'll be able to do some, raise your hand Q&A. I will tell you that we have two people. We have Lori Sternberg and Susan Baker Manning are both monitoring the chat as well as the the hand raising. And if anybody accidentally unmutes themselves, they might come in and mute you if necessary, okay? So just so you know, that is going on. All right, Ms. Kate Connolly, thank you so much for doing this with me today.
Are you kidding? This is probably the most exciting thing I am doing this year from my living room, like everything else I am doing this year. So I am sad that we can't be with you in person, but very grateful that through the miracle of modern technology, we can all come together and celebrate in this way. So thank you for that. And I should also say, like I suspect many of your family and friends and colleagues on this call, as someone who has benefited from the way that you interact with your various friends, family, and colleagues as they unload on you about their various, whether it be work or personal traumas, I do feel that I am also grateful to be able to give back in this way, because I have definitely taken advantage of your expertise in this area. So I feel like I should be thanking you.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you.
And so just for those of you who I don't know, I have known Kate for, over 20 years now. We actually went to college together, although didn't know each other well then. And then we connected in law school, and then both were working at the Department of Justice, although in different areas. And so I should also say, professionally, I have taken advantage of Kate's expertise. As a former prosecutor, I called upon her often, or in many situations, hijacked our various social lunches so that I could get her to weigh in on various matters I had where we were struggling with some really challenging victims' rights issues and how to support victims in various matters. And so I was thrilled to learn that she was putting all of her experience to paper and writing this book so that she could share it certainly beyond the DOJ audience and those friends and family who have known about this expertise for so long. And so Kate, I have some questions for you that have certainly been at the top of my mind as I have read the book and thought about all the work you have done in this area. And I know that others have similar questions. And so I'm going to try very hard to make this a discussion and not an interrogation. So please let me know if I do fall back into the sort of cross-examination position. But one of the sort of first questions that comes to mind is the fact that you have worked with people in trauma for so long, as you mentioned, dating back to your college days when you were staffing the hotline, and also similar volunteer work that you did in law school. And so what inspired you back then and now to do that work?
Yeah, I think I feel like there's kind of two things. So one is I came from a family history of domestic violence very early on. And fortunately, my mother had the resources and the wherewithal to get us to safety. And I did not grow up in a violent household, but it was an early kind of formative experience for me. But then also I feel like there's something about growing up in the DC area where people come to DC because they care very strongly about a subject, right? They feel very strongly about politics or the environment or the economy or whatever it is. And, when you grow up in this area, you are surrounded by people who felt really, really strongly about a field and then went and did something about it. And I think that also made a very strong impression on me early on, that it is, you can do things in the world to make the world a better place, that we all have the power to do that. And so, starting with the hotline, doing domestic violence work all those years ago, I had a few calls that were really, really, difficult and hard and kind of weighed heavily on me. But that gave me energy and it made me want to go do something about it. And that's what got me into law school and ultimately onto my career path.
Great. And speaking of your career path, I and those of us on the call who worked with you at DOJ, I think have a very good sense of sort of what you did there and the impact you had. But certainly we have a number of people on the call who wouldn't or don't have that background. So can you tell us a little bit more about what you did at DOJ, and in particular, your work in victims' rights there across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really think the job was kind of three parts. So I did a lot of department policy, advising the Justice Department on what the policy should be, for instance, on interviewing child victims, or on how you communicate with victims when you've got 200,000 or 2 million victims. We had one fraud case with 2 million victims. What are the things we should do to try to ensure that victims are able to participate in the case? So some of it was policy, and then some of it was training. I did a lot of training, really just hundreds and hundreds of trainings all over the country. There was one year that for some reason I went to Iowa 3 times. I don't really know how that happened. But, traveling all over, I did trainings in Alaska and Hawaii. I went to Mexico City, a lot of training, and then these kind of questions as they came up every day. And that was really, really fun for me to get to see the way that people were thinking about victims in their cases, and what it was that they wanted to try to figure out ways to help the victims in their cases. And because I had this role, it meant that I got to be there kind of for some of the sort of high profile cases of the department, everything from like way back to Enron. And, I consulted a little bit on the 9/11 when they were thinking about doing that, in the Manhattan, U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Pulse nightclub shooting, and the Boston Marathon bombing, and the South Carolina AME church shooting, and Larry Nassar and Bernie Madoff. And, those are kind of the high profile ones, but there were also just really memorable, important cases where they're not going to make headlines, but they really, really had a huge impact on individual people's lives. And in those cases, I was always so impressed with the care of the prosecutors and agents and victim advocates on those cases to do everything they could to be as caring and respectful, and to provide the services that the victims need. It was always so inspiring to me to get to work on those cases.
And the cases you described certainly have quite a range with respect to victims of violent crime, as well as victims of economic crimes. Was there a distinction or a difference in terms of how you counsel people to work with or treat those different victims?
There really wasn't. I mean, I will say, like, kind of historically, people have tended to think that they think of crime victim as like a violent crime victim. You think of like a robbery or a homicide or something like that. But I will say some of the hardest cases I worked on were fraud cases. There was one that really stuck with me, where it was a woman who was 75 years old who had MS and was in a wheelchair. And she was a victim of a Ponzi scheme perpetrated by her minister. And she lost her entire life savings at 75. And, I got the phone call from the victim coordinator saying, like, is there anything we can do for her? Because she's going to be homeless. She's about to end up on the street. And, there are unfortunately much fewer resources available for fraud victims, for, white collar crime victims. But, some of those cases really have stuck with me. And, we saw divorces and suicides and all kinds of things in large fraud cases. And so that's why one of the things that's kind of a touchstone to me is it's not so much, there's not like an objective standard for like, this is the type of thing that causes trauma and this is the type of thing that doesn't. The same kind of event can affect people differently. And some people, might be devastated by something that I would say like, that's not a big deal. And then the same, the reverse could be true in a different situation or simply a different day. And so I think it's really important that we just meet people where they are and ask, what is it that you need? That's always one of my guiding principles is, not to approach it with like, oh, well, you are, you are somebody who has just gotten diagnosed with COVID, or you are somebody who has just lost all your life savings or something. And therefore, these are the steps that we take, right? You have to meet each person right where they are and ask what it is that they need, and then try your best to kind of show up for them and provide them the resources so that they can take the next steps that they want to take that are appropriate for them.
And I think that leads right into sort of my next question, as you talked about transferring sort of that knowledge across victims, and even those who are not victims of crimes. What made you decide to write this book?
Yeah, it was largely because of Me Too. And I was pretty frustrated because I just felt like on the one hand, it's just this incredible moment in our, international history where people are focusing on these issues of victimization that I've been thinking about for decades. And I was so thrilled about that. But then I was so disappointed by some of the responses. And I really felt like we need more information, we need more training on this. And really my goals for the book were, I wanted to make sure first that I kind of destigmatized some of the discomfort people have around supporting people in trauma. Often we feel like uncomfortable. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid I'm going to say something wrong. I'm not really sure. I don't have the right expertise for this, all of that. So I wanted to just kind of destigmatize that and say, everybody feels uncomfortable. Like it's just kind of part of us, and accept it's totally normal to feel uncomfortable in that moment. So let's take away the blame from that, was one of my goals. And then the other goal was to give people the tools to do it anyway, to recognize, like, listen, I might not do this well, but like, at least I know some basics of what are the things that I should be doing to support this person who I care about. And that's the other thing that I found universally. Everybody wants to be helpful. There's nobody who's like, I don't really care that you're, devastated about whatever you're going through. People want to help. It's just that they're not really sure how. And so in the book, I tried to just be incredibly practical. Like, one of the things I learned through my time at DOJ, I would get these phone calls from prosecutors, and they would say, well, you told me that I didn't have to do what the victim wanted in the case, and I could take a plea. That was up to me. And I would say, yeah. And they'd be like, and now the victim is really mad. And so, like, what do I do now? And I'm like, well, you talk to him. And they're like, well, maybe you should talk to him. And I'm like, no, really, you can do this. So it was literally just like giving words, like, here are some phrases that you can say when you have no idea what to say. So just trying to be very, very practical and, just easy tips that hopefully people can implement without too much thought or care, too much worrying.
Right. And you talk a little bit about sort of how these prosecutors are handling that with their victims, but why is it so vital that we have managers who are able to do that in the workplace and who are able to respond empathetically to their employees and colleagues?
Yeah, there's kind of two sides of the coin. So one side is the negative response, right? So there's this concept called institutional betrayal. And what that means is, if I am in a hard time, I'm kind of in a crisis, one of the things that is normal for me to do is to look to a leader or an institution that I associate myself with. So, this is why we rely so much on political leaders, right? We look to our political leaders, we look to our organizations leaders, we look to our school leaders, right? Like, kids look to their teachers, right? In moments of crisis, that we look to our leaders and our institutions. In that moment, if we get an unsupportive response, if we get a response that is minimizing or blaming, in some way kind of takes the wind out of our sails, that can be its own injury to us, separate and apart from the injury that we were suffering. So for instance, if we say, like, we are very, very worried right now about COVID, and then our organization's leaders are not hearing that message and are putting policies in place that we think are going to endanger us and are not addressing our concerns, we have both the fear, but then we also have this sense of betrayal because we look to our organization to support us and we feel that it hasn't. Okay. So that's one reason why it's so important, the way that managers and leaders respond in this time. The other is kind of the flip side, and that's this concept of psychological safety. And that's what happens when we do a good job supporting our teams through a challenging time. So there was this phenomenal study a few years ago that Google did. And, Google obviously can study everything under the sun. And they decided they wanted to study what made a healthy team. And one of the things they did was they looked at just, tons and tons of different teams. And they tried to analyze, what was it that made some teams really productive and healthy and others not? And they looked at things like, what if all the team members have a similar background or a different background? Or the teams had, one strong leader or many strong leaders or no strong leaders, or the teams socialized outside of work or they didn't socialize outside of work. And they couldn't find anything that was like the common denominator for what made a healthy team until finally they hit upon this idea of psychological safety. And what psychological safety means is I feel safe saying to you, I don't know the answer, or I think I messed up, or I'm having a really hard time right now and I need some help. And what they found was teams that had that sense of psychological safety were so much more creative, healthier, more loyal, better communication, better outcomes, more successful across the board. And one of the fastest ways to build psychological safety was by having a good response to some sort of crisis, some sort of personal problem. And, just think about that in your own life when you think about times when you've had a hard time, and the people that you've relied on during that time have really bonded with you, right? This is why organizations do these ropes courses and, trust falls and those things. Like if you can stand with each other during a hard time, that's a really, really strong bond. And that's why we're at this especially crucial moment right now. During the coronavirus, we have this kind of international worldwide crisis. And the way that leaders lead through this time is going to reverberate within their organizations for years to come, either negatively or positively.
Yeah, when you talk about moments of crisis presenting opportunities, the last year between coronavirus and social justice issues and the political landscape has certainly not had a shortage of moments of crisis. And I think a number of people have questions and I want to make sure we give time for that. But before we turn to that and some of the other pieces, I think it would be helpful if the audience hears a little bit about your approach and this laser method, which you reference in the book, because a number of people obviously have not had the opportunity to read the book yet. And so can you tell us a little bit about your approach and the thought behind that and what the benefits would be of using this approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started writing the book, I just sat down and I really thought, what are the things that I would say are kind of the ideal pieces of an empathetic response to a story of trauma? And I decided there were really 5, and I came up with an acronym, in part because I'm a government lawyer and we love acronyms, and in part because I knew that when we're having that moment of oh God, I don't know what to say, it's helpful to have something to kind of hold on to, if you can remember the acronym. So the acronym is LASER, and that's for listen, acknowledge, share, empower, and return. And listen, is pretty obvious, and the book goes through a lot about active listening techniques and controlling our own response while we're listening to a story of trauma. Acknowledge is a step that I think is obvious, but often is missed. Acknowledge is just literally saying, I hear you, thank you for sharing that. That sounds really hard. Something like that. You just acknowledge that this person has shared this with you. And then share means literally share information. I think I mentioned earlier, one of the hardest things is this feeling of loss of control. I don't know what's going on and I crave information. So we share information, we share, and that can include things like the process going forward. This is what we do with these complaints, just sharing information and then empowering with resources. That means I'm going to give you the number for our security office or for EAP, and again, the idea is we are asking what it is that they want, what's helpful to you. And then we help them by giving them some tools. And then return means literally just return and check in later. How are you doing? Do you need more resources, but also a return to ourselves, because we have to acknowledge that hearing hard stories has an effect on us too. And so we have to take some steps to guard against compassion fatigue, sort of maintain our own self-care. So the book goes into that as well.
Perfect. Good. Well, I knew we had talked about there are a couple of friends who are online who wanted to have the opportunity to say hello and to provide, sorry, Thor is planting himself, some of the book giveaways. And so I'm going to turn it over now for a few minutes to Dr. Pippa Shulman from Cambridge, Massachusetts, who is another longtime friend. So Pip, we will hopefully unmute you.
I unmuted myself. In this day and age, I know how to do that. It is, wow. I have known Kate Manning for more than half my life, and it's the best half, and I will let you determine how many years that's been. I calculated it today, and it's actually been a lot. As Kate Connolly said, I'm a physician, and so I'm in a completely different field of work. But we are a group that deals with trauma almost every day, and even the collective trauma of coronavirus over the last year. And so I've had the incredible benefit of having Kate Manning be my friend and give me personal guidance, but also make me a better leader in my organizations, large and small, a better listener. And I would like to say that in healthcare, we like acronyms too. It's how we learn a lot of things. And I think it's those bite-sized pieces, the what to do, that is, you've always provided that guidance, not told me what to do, but given me the tools to do it myself. And this book is really just the culmination of that. I'm so delighted and so proud. And it's wonderful to see everybody here. And I think I get to announce 2 prize winners. Is that right?
You may love prizes.
Okay, I do love prizes. This is right up my alley. So I'm going to announce 10 people are getting books tonight. I'm announcing the first 2. And so I'd like to congratulate Deb Hersfeld. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Oh, she's cheering. I love it. And David McMullen. Congratulations. And congratulations most of all to Kate.
Thank you, Pip.
Excellent. So I'm going to turn it over now to Susan and potentially Lori to share with us some of the questions that have come in through the group chat. I will say we've had a number, and it's really nice to have such an engaged audience. Although before I do that, just in the interest of time, let me also give the names of the winners for the book Recipients that I am awarding this evening. And my 2 books are going to Claudine Pohl, and I apologize because I suspect I'm probably mispronouncing that, and Shirley Jones. And so we'll be in touch after the call this evening to get contact info so we can be sure that we get these books to the appropriate recipients. And with that,
wait, real quick, Kate, if you don't mind, there is another special guest that I would like to acknowledge, and that is my fabulous editor, Sarah Kendrick from HarperCollins Leadership. I am just so over the moon because she is the one that has made it all possible, that I've been able to have the experience of writing this book and sharing these words with all of you. So Sarah, if you are there and you feel comfortable, I would love to, hear a little hello from you. And if you could share a little bit about why you decided that you wanted to publish this book, that would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to see this book hit the shelves. I like to think of where I was when I signed a book and I was in an office, and so it was a long time ago. So it's been a long time coming, but the reason I signed this book is very simple. And it is because if someone were to walk into my office tomorrow and they had an issue, would I know how to respond? And the answer is no. And most managers wouldn't. And it's not okay that HR is the only one that understands. It's not okay that senior leaders are the only ones who know what to do or have that language. And so it's important that everyone does. So that's why it was very important for me to get your book out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And congratulations.
Thanks. All right. So should we go to Susan? Do you want to call out a question from the chat?
Yeah, absolutely. So Jessica has a great question. Could you talk a little bit about the tension that sometimes exists, or at least is sometimes perceived by both HR folks and attorneys, between being empathetic and protecting the organization from liability or other risk?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jessica. It's a great question. So I understand, and I know that often people feel very concerned about that. And I think part of why I feel more comfortable with it is because I had all these years at the Justice Department. And so I knew that saying that I am supportive of you and I'm going to give you resources and I hear you is not the same as I can't believe that horrible man did that to you, right? Like there is a way to be supportive and still conduct a full investigation of what happened and try to get an understanding of it. And when we can do that, we see just really incredible results. I mean, there are some statistics in the book on this, but one of the things that really has influenced me is Leilani Schweitzer, who does some work at the Stanford hospital system. And what Stanford does in instances where there is some sort of unexpected medical outcome, right, in a case, Stanford does a full investigation of what happened, and then they go and they meet with the family and they share everything about what happened. And they do that for a couple reasons. One, they want, as medical professionals, they want to uncover if there are any errors that happened. Number two, just to be human and respectful of the people who have gone through a tragic event. They want to show them the respect of giving them the information about what happened. But then also what they have found is the business case is there. They have saved money by having an empathetic and open, honest approach with people, even in the instance of medical errors. And so I think that there is this perceived tension, but I don't think it really has to be there. And I think that when we approach people with openness and honesty, we often end up with a much better outcome, even from a legal perspective. So I hope that helps. Yeah, thanks. Good question. Thanks, Jessica.
Let me ask another question from the chat. Do you think COVID is a silver lining and it's an opportunity to include empathy in the workplace? And how do you think the pandemic is relevant to what you're working on?
Yeah, I've got to say, I've been really so pleased to see so many organizations recognizing the call of this moment, that we have this moment where people are struggling with something universally and recognizing this is something that we as leaders have to address. There's also something about the fact that we're all seeing each other's homes, right? Like it's really a lot harder to have very strict boundaries between home and work right now. And so I think that it is a wonderful opportunity. And I think we really have seen a lot of leaders step up and take that opportunity to use this moment to talk about the hard stuff, to say it's okay to talk about the hard stuff and try to figure out how to support their teams. So yeah, thank you. Should we do another quick giveaway? I think it might be time for live from New York, Joey Fortuna.
Hi, I'm Joey Fortuna. I've been lucky enough to be friends with Kate for over 20 years. Also, I've made a vow that I'd refer to it as Catherine when there's an audience. So I've been lucky enough to be friends with Catherine for over 20 years. We met through my fabulous sister-in-law, Danielle Drumkey. And so core to what we're discussing tonight is the art of listening. And when they describe their experiences with Kate, I think Kate Connolly and Pippa really nailed it. Essentially, Catherine's gift for listening has been what has distinguished her among my friends. I mean, I'm a technologist, and so as I say to everyone, I've been practicing social distancing since middle school. And one of the most sort of unsettling experiences I had when I first met Kate is that she actually listened to what I said with kind of an intense kindness and interest that made me squirm under the scrutiny of it. But over the years, I've learned that that's essential to her nature. And so I think this suggests that this book isn't just the logical outcome of her career and the things that she's done in her career and the achievements she's had. It's just part of her process of evolving as a truly caring human. And I'm really glad to be here and sharing the congratulations. And I'm so excited to see such a big crowd. And I'm very happy for you, Kate. So congratulations. And congratulations also to Candace Lanham, who is the proud recipient of a free copy. And I know I'm going to pronounce the last name wrong. Melissa, it's spelled D-A-Y. Is that Day? Melissa Day.
So hard to pronounce that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I got it. I think I got it.
Yay. Thank you, Joey. All right, should we do another question? Susan or Lori, or if anybody has their hand raised, you're welcome to unmute yourselves and ask a question too.
I have one more from the chat, and
Okay.
I'm not good enough at Zoom to see all the raised hands. I don't think so. A couple people asked a version of this, and I personally feel like it's particularly apt, as I have been advised to acknowledge what the child just said more than once. What are your thoughts about, since you've also done writing for kids, that's sort of a different part of your life, any thoughts about translating the book to children or to sort of non-business audiences, and how do you think that translates?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, these same steps I use with our kids all the time, to the point where they sometimes are like, I know you're just acknowledging me. But I think it's really important that kids recognize the same issues. I mean, and trust me, we've got 3 kids in the house. There are always opportunities to practice this, right? And so we talk about these issues. You know, one of the discussions we had at dinner one night was that you know, we talked about how sometimes somebody will be really, really angry about something or upset about something, and you know they're wrong. But when you just say to them they're wrong, for some reason they don't say like, oh, thank you for clarifying, I feel so much better now, right? And so what we talked about was I talked about it as like the purple hippo story, right? So, you know, say you're talking to somebody who says, I am so angry that because of global warming, hippos are now purple, and that is ridiculous. It is awful. We need to do something. These poor hippos are, you know, are having to suffer because of our actions. And you know that hippos, that's not happening. Hippos are not turning purple. But if you just say to them, no, you're wrong, they're not gonna be able to hear you. So what you have to do is first acknowledge and just say like, wow, yes, I can understand why you'd be angry. Of course, hippos don't deserve to turn purple because of human behavior. And then once they feel heard and acknowledged, then you can say, actually, though, let's just take a look. I'm pretty sure they're not turning purple right now. So yeah, like global warming, definitely a problem, but I think the hippos are okay. It's one of the kind of key points in the book, and I'm very grateful to Megan Reardon Jarvis, who gave me some great language around that. But I also, there's a quote I love from Theodore Roosevelt that says, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So it's really important that we acknowledge people. And that's something that I think kids need to learn, and all of us need to learn, right? It's not only at work that this matters. I often get the question of, you know, these 5 steps, is it important that they happen in the workplace? It's not, but I will say that in general, if you're just, you know, supporting a friend or a family member, you probably don't need all 5 steps. Probably just the first 2 steps, listen and acknowledge, are enough. The reason I did all 5 is for a workplace specifically, that if somebody is coming to you at work and asking for help with something, you know, in a work environment, that's where it's going to be important to employ those last 3 steps. All right, I think we only have about 15 minutes left, and I know we have 2 more guests, I think. So could we get, how about Jelon Stewart? Jelon, are you on?
I am. Hi, Kate. How are you? So I've known Kate for probably the shortest amount of time, about 8 years, and I met her when I became chief of the Victim Witness Assistance Unit at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, which is the largest federal victim program in the country. And so I called on Kate early and often. Oftentimes I'd call her from court with questions, and she always came to my aid. And then I recently joined the biggest private employer in the world, and I find myself still calling Kate. In fact, I called her last week for advice on an issue. So I want to start by saying, congratulations, Kate. I'm so very, very proud of you. And this book is going to have far-reaching implications for both employers and employees. And as I told you last week, if you touch just one employer and you are able to get that employer to change their approach, the impact on employees and victims is going to be significant. You will change their outcomes. And so I'm very proud of you and so happy that this resource is available to the world. So congratulations again. I'd also like to congratulate two winners. I have Tina Winkham and Scott Matthews. Congratulations.
Thank you, Joanne. Excellent. All right. How about maybe we can do like one more question and then we will go to our last special guest.
Yeah, sure. One more question. What was the most challenging aspect of writing the book? It's a book about trauma. How does that, it's, as you know, it's not the easiest subject. What's the hardest part of writing the book and how'd you overcome it?
Yeah, honestly, the hardest part was the psychology. Oh my Lord. And some of you on this call are well aware of it. I leaned heavily on psychologists, including Dr. Stephanie Kendall and Dr. Chris Wilson and Megan Reardon Jarvis. And these poor people, I would call them again and again and say like, now do I have it? And they'd be like, no, you really do not. So you will see there's a section in the book on trauma in the brain, and I spent more time on that section. It's short, but more time than probably the rest of the book combined. It was really, really hard. But finally, thanks to so much fantastic help from people, I was able to get through that. I think, I'm a lawyer. I can read a legal case very, very quickly and know what it says and what's relevant about it. But these psychological studies, oh my God, I would be poring over them. And then it would take me an hour to write one sentence and think, am I really accurately capturing what that said? So yeah, I would say it was the psychological studies that nearly did me in, but I am glad that they're in there. And I'm especially so glad for all of the help that I got along the way. All right, good. And then how about Seijo Patel? Seijo, I know you were having Wi-Fi problems. Are you there? Did you make it?
Hi, everyone. I am. There are horses next to me congratulating you here from Sonoma, California. I'm also a proud member of the 20+ year friendship club with Kate. We met in our law firm days in a job that neither of us was like as excited to do, but together we were really excited. And she is the first and only person that she interviewed me for that job. And I hugged her at the end of the interview because that's just kind of how Kate is. So I also want to say, Kate and I work in overlapping practice areas in that I've been a prosecutor, criminal defense lawyer, and I do civil rights work now. And I want to just underscore that the skills that the book builds that Kate and I have talked about for years and in every conversation, because it's not just work for her, it's also the things she loves and it's who she is. And that's how you know that there's something super authentic about a book when the person who wrote it lives that issue. It's so much more relevant actually post-COVID, as I see in my practice now, that people have lost the ability to just react to other people, not with their families, with their coworkers. Zoom has taken away anyone's ability to read. In looking at this camera, I'm looking at a green dot. I'm not looking at any one of your faces. I can't read your faces anymore. I can't read body language anymore. And so to emerge out of this and go back to work, it's going to be tough. I am busier than I've ever been in my practice, and that's bad. I should be not busy at all. That means actually the world is doing great. So anyone who reads and can absorb messages from Kate's book, and I think the gracious message at the beginning is that it's uncomfortable for everyone. And if people can acknowledge that about themselves, I so agree with what Joanne so beautifully said, that I think it will touch a lot of people. So thank you for putting this beautiful piece of you in the world, because everyone should be so lucky to have 20 days of your friendship, let alone 20 years. And I am excited. Everyone is at the edge of their seats because these are the last two winners. Carrie Callahan and Darlene Averick. And I really hope I have a name that's not pronounceable. So I hope I said your names right. Congratulations, and congratulations, Kate. Super proud of you.
Thank you so much, Seijo. Gosh, you guys, I'm like getting a little teary for all these like really kind things that people are saying. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And thank you for all the phenomenal questions. I think Kate Connolly wanted to do like a quick rapid fire round maybe, which I'm a little nervous about because I don't know what these questions are going to be. But then after that, I already have the champagne next to me, so we can do a little cheers, okay?
I do,
Connolly?
but before we get to that, since we're talking about you out in the world, can you tell us all a little bit about your podcast? Because not everyone on this call may be aware that you have a podcast to sort of go along with the book. And as someone who's been obsessed with listening to it, I want to make sure other people get that opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I always forget to mention the podcast.
That's what I'm here for.
Thank you. Yeah, so I have a podcast. It's also called The Empathetic Workplace, and it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And, people had told me for a little while that it would be a good idea to start a podcast. And I thought, who wants to just listen to me? And then I realized, oh, I can interview people. That sounds fantastic. And so then once I realized this is really an opportunity to talk to other people who are interested in these topics. So people who work on issues of trauma or people who are empathetic leaders. And I've gotten to talk to people from just a wide array of fields, anything from a volleyball coach to a doctor to, lawyers and kind of the gamut. And it's been really, really fun. So definitely check it out. The episodes are, generally about 35, 40 minutes or so. So it's not too long, but we've had some really great conversations and I'd love if you checked it out. Thank you.
Yes. And I do have to give credit where credit is due. This idea for the rapid fire questions came from one of your podcast guests, Anjali Chaturvedi, who happens to also be my boss, although that's not the reason I'm taking her advice today. She mentioned how James Lipton at the end of his interviews does these types of questions. And I went back and watched a number of them. And it really is a great way to allow people to get to know you a little bit better. I am not going to use the questions that James Lipton himself uses, although his first question is your favorite curse word, which is better suited for me than for you, which is why I'm not going to use them. But I do have some questions for you about writing and books and things that I think are particularly up your alley. So what is your favorite fiction book?
My favorite fiction book? Oh my goodness. That is really, really hard. Maybe, that's really hard. Okay. I will go with Bel Canto by Anne Patchett. Although very close is Jazz by Toni Morrison, both of which have music at the core and they're just so beautiful.
Yes. Favorite nonfiction book?
I assume I can't say mine.
For yours.
Let's see. I really love Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. I think that is just a really, really great, inspiring book.
Perfect.
And wait, but I have one more. Oh, gosh.
So that's good, because part of the reason I was thinking about these types of questions is during COVID, I know we're all looking for, different ways to entertain ourselves, and people are finding more time to read and engage in these types of activities. So we'll take another one.
All right. Okay. So the other one that I really love is called Deep Work, and it's by Cal Newport. And what I love about that book is he talks about how important it is that we set aside all of the distractions and just go deep into the field that we are in and we want to be in. And to me, I don't think I would have been able to write the book if I hadn't read that book. So that's my other one.
Good. What about your favorite children's book?
Ooh, well, what I'm going to say is the book that was my favorite as a child, and that is Anne of Green Gables. And we have Anne of Green Gables was written by Lucy Maud Montgomery, and we have a daughter, Lucy, with, long red hair and braids. So it was a very, very important formative book for me.
Good. What is your favorite time to write?
Early morning. I got in the habit. We had twins, and our son Henry woke up very early for a long time, and now even though he's nearly a teenager and sleeps late, I still am in the habit of waking up usually between 5 and 6 in the morning, and the house is quiet, and it's just a really good, nice, productive writing time for me.
Good. What will your first post-COVID vacation be?
Ooh, we're going to go to California. Seijo, we're coming your way.
Excellent.
Yeah, we decided this was the trip we wanted to do last summer and we didn't get to do it. And I think we're gonna try to do it this summer, where we fly into Los Angeles and drive up the coast and fly out of San Francisco. I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Perfect. Good. What would you be doing if you hadn't spent your career doing crime victims' rights work and now, trauma-centered work and writing?
I don't know. I think I probably always would have been a writer, no matter what. Although I do fantasize sometimes about opening a store that is a combination bookstore, stationery store, and tea shop. And I would call it Kate's Folly. So stay tuned. That might be coming in the future.
Perfect. I'm happy to work at such a folly store. So, and what will your next book be about?
Well, hopefully, what I've been thinking about and researching and talking about a lot lately, I do a lot of speaking to people about this. How do you respond well to a story of trauma? When you have somebody come to you, what are the things you should do? But the question I always get is, that's great, and I now understand how to respond when somebody comes forward, but how do I make sure they come forward in the first place? And so that's the next book I'd like to write, is how do you create a culture where it's okay to bring up these stories?
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to have that folly. And I know we do have a few minutes left, so I think now is the time we want to make sure we have the opportunity to raise a glass for you. Since we aren't able to do that in person, we do want to do that remotely.
I'm going to put everybody on gallery view so I can see all your beautiful faces. Oh, it is so fun to see you all. Thank you. And everybody, you can just unmute yourself right now and say hello and congratulations. And Candace.
Cheers.
We're so proud of
you. Cheers. Congratulations.
Cheers, Kate.
Oh,
Kate, go.
Oh, it's so fun to see you all.
So proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you for being here. I hope you like the book. Thank you so much to my family, to my friends, to all of you who have shown up for this moment. I'm so grateful to everybody who has helped me along the way. And I hope that you love the book. And if you have any questions, I know there were a lot of questions in the chat we didn't get to. So you should all have my email address, but I will also send out an email tomorrow to everybody so that you all have it. Please follow up with me and let's continue the conversation. Okay. Thank you all so much. Good night, everybody.
Congrats.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Make sure you save the chat. There's lots of good stuff in there for you.
How do I save the chat?
Open the chat and the three little
It'll
things.
save with the recording.
There we go.
It'll download for you.
I'm saving it for you, Kate.
There you
Thank
go.
you.
Hi, Kate.
Team effort. I hope we captured this.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Amy Gross. Hello.
Hi, congratulations. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you.
Susan, if you're still on, will you save the chat too?
So proud of you.
I will.
Congratulations,
All right,
Hi,
thank you.
Susan Baker Manning.
Rosie.
Okay.
Oh, so good to see
Josh,
you
you
all.
wanna wave to
Thank
your mom?
you.
I saved the chat, but I don't know where it went. So.
Josh? Do you want to wave to your mom?
All right, I'm going to stop recording now if I can figure out how to do that.